Thanks everyone for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Andrea Salmon and I've got Eric Morales waiting in the wings to talk to us today about the importance of exercise and being active when we're living with MS. We start all our programs by acknowledging and paying respect to the traditional custodians, past, present and emerging, on whose lands we meet wherever we're dialing in from. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and the relationship of Aboriginal people to country. We also respect the cultural authority of the elders in each community. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Eric. Eric Morales has been working for MSL since 2018, and he's an exercise physiologist based up in Lidcombe at the Lidcombe Gym in New South Wales. Eric has a keen interest in the human body and the nervous system, and he's passionate about exercise as a way of assisting people, particularly with MS, but I'm sure everyone, to improve and manage our overall health and well-being, and for people with MS to help manage their symptoms. And he enjoys working out and staying on the move too. And we were just talking about COVID and lockdown and restrictions, and so it's going to be challenging for some people to be as active as they want to be, but that's why you've dialed in today. So thank you, Eric. I'm going to click a couple of buttons here, and so you can show your slides, and I'll turn off my camera as well. Apologies again, Eric's system doesn't have a camera in Lidcombe, so you'll have to keep this photo in mind as you hear his voice.
Lovely. So, well, thank you. Thanks, Andrea, for that introduction, and thank you to everyone for tuning in and listening. So first of all, I'd just like to say I hope everyone is doing well and in good spirits during these challenging times, I'm sure. So one other thing before I get started, I'd like to mention is that although I've come across a lot of clients with MS who vary in terms of their clinical presentation, the number one thing that all clients seem to have is a level of resilience that for me is really inspiring. And so for me, that's why I really love my job, and I really love presenting and sharing my knowledge and information to all you lovely people. So hopefully everyone is able to get something out of the presentation today. So as Andrew mentioned, today's topic is all things exercise and MS. And so for some, it might just reaffirm what you're already doing. For others, it may provide a whole bunch of new information. But I hope that regardless of where you're at, you do find the presentation of benefit to you. So there seems to be a lot of interest based on the responses from when you guys had to register, which is really encouraging and great to see. And so I really tried to tailor the overall theme of those responses into the presentation. So I guess the main themes were things like staying active, staying motivated, exercise education, examples of some basic exercises that you can perhaps do at home. And then some responses were just to simply gain more information. So I do appreciate the responses, and hopefully we're able to achieve that in today's webinar as well. In saying that though, I do want to set the tone and just reiterate that this is more so an information webinar, and so it's probably not the best platform to provide more so tailored one-on-one advice. In saying that though, we will discuss options and how you may be able to access that more tailored approach to your specific situation later on in the slides. And based on the responses when registering as well, I think it would be really beneficial to access those services that are available, especially for those who are keen to get active but perhaps need that guidance or motivation to do so. So just to give a bit of context as to what will be discussed, exercise clearly forms the bulk of the presentation, but I wanted to talk exercise from a different perspective, and that's from the perspective of brain health and how that ultimately trickles down and affects everything else. Let's first start by discussing the benefits of exercise. So what I often find is that people get very excited and tend to lose track on the why. And I believe that if we're able to clearly understand the why or the benefits of exercise, then we're more likely to then participate in regular exercise. So let's just bring this back to the very start. So in relation to MS, we know that MS is a neurological condition, yes, that affects the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and spinal cord and optic nerve. Now, I won't go into too much detail or into the pathophysiology of MS, but what I want to come across is the importance of the central nervous system and how that ultimately affects everything else. So we can agree on two things. Number one, that MS affects the central nervous system. And then number two, the central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord. So from this, we can then appreciate that brain health is absolutely crucial in managing our general health, but also the actual MS itself. So the 4 pillars here are listed, and I think it's very important time to bring about the 4 pillars of brain health, because now more than ever, with lockdowns or wherever you may be, we're finding maybe a bit more spare time in our day, and so hopefully we're able to find practical ways that we can integrate these pillars of brain health. So by looking after our brain, then we're effectively looking after everything else. So just to explain this a bit more, so let's imagine the brain as the king. So absolutely everything goes through the king. All the information, interaction, and actions must first be consulted with the king. And so this is sort of how the brain works. And so from this, we can then begin to imagine our brain as a sort of supercomputer that is constantly receiving, sending information and liaising, communicating. And it allows us to respond to situations, stores information, sends messages to our muscles, and so on, and helps us interact with our environment. So for the purpose of today's webinar, I won't go into the first 3 pillars of brain health, but instead focus more so on all things exercise and how we can lead and stay active. So with exercise, it should be an absolutely non-negotiable exercise. So although I do acknowledge there are barriers that with exercise, especially with MS, which we'll discuss later on in the slides, but there are statistics that show up to 80% of people with MS not exercising at all. And so I say this because the research is very clear to highlight the link between MS symptom management and exercise. But most importantly, I'm able to personally see the benefit that exercise brings in really empowering an individual to know that they are in control of their health. So, of course, do what's possible for you. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this whole presentation, it's simply to keep active and moving, because exercise really is medicine. So let's start with the why. Why should I exercise? Now, I've broken this down into 3 core components. So we've got the benefits of exercise in general health, the benefits of exercise in MS symptom management, and the benefits of exercise for brain health. So to start off, let's talk about the role of exercise in brain health, because as we established in the previous slide, the brain is the king, okay? So as I discussed before, exercise is neuroprotective. So what that means is that exercise maintains and grows neural pathways by releasing 2 chemicals through physical activity. And those are the nerve growth factor and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which both function to stimulate the growth and the maintenance of the nerve cells of the brain. So the way I like to think of it, and the way I like to sometimes explain it to clients, is that what happens if you don't water the grass? So if you don't water the grass, it doesn't receive that bath of water it needs for the grass to grow. And so that's exactly the same concept with exercise and the brain. Our brain needs that bath of brain food, which is derived from exercise, okay? And so we know through exercise that we release these two brain chemicals or brain food. So if you're already incorporating some form of regular exercise, then great work, your brain and body is thanking you. If not, then that's okay. Let's work together to find ways we can make this happen, because as I said, exercise is and should be for everyone non-negotiable. So when we talk exercise and MS, we do largely focus on the benefit exercise can have on one's MS symptoms, which is very valid and true. But what's often left behind or forgotten in some cases is the powerful impact exercise can have on everyone's general health and well-being. And so that's why I just wanted to touch on this point as well today. So unfortunately for those people living with MS, MS may not be the only health concern. And so the importance of regular exercise can't be stressed enough when you have the likes of high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, and so on that can negatively impact on your overall health and therefore negatively impact on your MS as well. Now, the reason I say that is because we know that those who live active lifestyles and are relatively healthy are more likely to flatten the curve in regards to their MS progression. Because one thing that is in your control is modifiable lifestyle changes, such as exercise. And so the power of exercise really is illustrated in this graph here from the World Health Organization. So based on these figures presented, we can say that 5 out of the top 10 leading causes of death are directly influenced by regular exercise. So that's 50% of causes that can be drastically reduced through regular physical activity. So that's your high blood pressure, high blood glucose, physical inactivity, overweight and obesity, and high cholesterol as well. And so when we're talking about one's health, it's also important that we consider the many aspects of one's health. And so we have to acknowledge that health has many dimensions to it. So too often we can maybe sometimes focus on one's physical health and how they present, without also considering the psychological and social aspect that forms one's overall health as well, which are both extremely critical areas to focus on. Now, especially with MS, the psychological and social impact from MS can't be overlooked, and actually in some cases can be the main outcome to be achieved, because a healthy mindset and a sense of belonging and empowerment is such a powerful asset to have, and it really does go a long way in building one's resilience and ongoing battle with MS as well. So although MS may be the main concern, at the same time, I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's not the only concern, which is why the power of exercise is can't be stressed enough. So I guess that's just something to think of when you're trying to answer your own question as to why you should get active or perhaps continue being active as well. So we've discussed the benefits of exercise on one's brain health and general health. Now let's just highlight the benefit exercise can have in managing one's MS symptoms as well. So on the list here, we have some common MS symptoms that have been shown to benefit from regular exercise. So for example, we have balance. Balance is a common symptom of MS, or a reduced balance, should I say, and that can greatly impact on one's daily living. And so what research has shown is that with an appropriate exercise intervention, balance as well as some of these other MS symptoms can be better managed when you compare it to no purposeful exercise intervention. So once again, the benefits of exercise aren't only related to one's MS symptoms, but when you also consider the impact of exercise on your brain health and your overall / general health as well, you hopefully begin to understand, or it reaffirms, why exercise really is a non-negotiable. So we've discussed the why exercise is beneficial, why we should be partaking in regular exercise. Let's now delve into the evidence-based guidelines into how much exercise we should be partaking in as well. So before I do that, though, I won't spend too much time on this slide, but I did just want to clear things up a bit, I guess, into the difference between physical activity and exercise. So put simply, physical activity is just that. It's anything that requires bodily movement. And so I've listed some examples here, but the pictures also do quite well to illustrate that physical activity can come in many shapes and sizes and in many forms, okay? And then when we talk about exercise, exercise is more so planned, structured, and purposeful towards achieving or working towards a particular fitness goal. So, for example, performing balance and strengthening exercises to improve your walking would be a form of exercise, as it's structured and purposeful towards working on your goal of improving your walking patterns, and therefore improving your quality of life and ability to partake in daily activities. So remember, physical activity is any activity that requires bodily movement, and exercise is planned and structured. So I've just taken a snippet actually from the MS Research Australia Lifestyle Guide, which provides evidence-based guidelines when it comes to exercise. And so we can see that the guidelines are clear in recommending exercise to be performed 2 to 3 times a week in those with a general level of fitness experience, and increasing in frequency of up to 5 days for the more advanced gym goers. But from my personal experience in working with people with MS, I would say that most people would fall within the general level of fitness category. So, that 2 to 3 times a week is a good starting point. Or if it's right now it's 0 days a week, then you can build up to that 2 to 3 times a week, and it might just be once a week to start off with. But of course, in saying that, make sure that when you're looking at these recommendations provided, you're doing so in a way that suits your goals and your situation as well. Also, for those with more severe disability levels, it's recommended to perform daily exercises for the arms and legs, but also focus on more gentle exercise, such as stretching, especially for those who may spend a majority of the time seated as well. So the frequency of the exercise will depend on your fitness levels, but generally speaking, it's recommended to participate in structured exercise 2 to 3 times a week. We know we should be trying to follow an exercise plan at least 2 times a week or 2 to 3 times a week, but how much physical activity should we be doing? Now, I think it's important to note that we can't bank exercise. We can't deposit exercise into an account and be confident that those assets or that exercise that you did 2 weeks ago will stay there permanently. Instead, exercise requires frequent attention, but most importantly, consistency. So the Australian Health Guidelines are consistent in identifying people should aim to participate in at least 150 minutes of moderate physical activity or 75 minutes of vigorous physical activity per week. Now I don't want you to feel discouraged and be like, oh, I'm never going to reach, that guideline, or so there's no point of me starting or doing anything. But I think it's important to note that the exercise guidelines are just that, they're just guidelines, okay? Now, I'm not saying that, if you're currently doing no physical activity at all or very minimal, maybe, to then suddenly increase your activity levels by 90% or 100%, where you're going from 0 to 150 minutes. How about let's just take a step back and maybe assess your personal situation, do what you think is manageable for you, set a goal, and then maybe build up from there. But also, let's not make things so complicated and technical as well. So, I don't expect you to be tracking every single minute of physical activity or exercise that you do, and you're doing 18 minutes on one day, and then you're doing 36 and a half minutes the other day. Because if that's what you're doing, or that's what you're focusing on, then I feel that we're losing or failing to understand the real essence or the basic principle of this, which is just to stay physically active on most days and get a regular exercise routine going as well on a weekly basis. But of course, in saying all this, the benefits and how much we should be doing, there are barriers to exercise as well, whether it be mobility, motivation, family commitments, work commitments, as well as the ongoing MS symptoms as well, whether it be fatigue or heat sensitivity, as well as especially with the warmer weather approaching as summer approaches late in December. So we'll talk about some of those common barriers and how we can overcome them in the next few slides as well. But before we move on, I'll just quickly touch on the RPE scale here. So the RPE scale is just a really easy and effective way of understanding the level of exercise intensity that you're participating in. So a basic rule of thumb is that if you're able to hold a short conversation, then it's more likely than not in that moderate intensity, compared to if you're only able to formulate a few words, then it's more likely than not in that vigorous or above categories. So the RPE scale is just a very easy 1 to 10 in a color-coded system as well, that just helps you determine the intensity that you're exercising at. So we've discussed the benefits of exercise, the how much exercise or the frequency of exercise as well. And so before I continue, I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page, or if there's any questions, then I'm more than happy to answer them, or I'm also happy to continue on as well. So yeah.
Thanks, Eric. No specific questions coming through at the moment, but a couple of questions relating to getting support from an exercise physiologist. So I've made a note to myself that I'm going to send everybody the flyer about telehealth and tapping into that. And I've also made a note that I'm going to send everybody the MSRA lifestyle guidelines link to read more about that. So that's going well. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Awesome. Okay, so with that in mind, well, that's good news. So I'll continue on, and actually something that I remember that popped in the responses was, what exercises should I be doing? What are the best exercises that I can do? And although I'd love to give a direct answer, it's not always possible to do so. So, and I mean, in that situation, I think it depends. I guess it depends on your goals. It depends on your main concerns. How it depends on how you present as well. And as you all know, MS is a condition that varies as well in terms of symptoms and presentation as well. So because of this, I don't think I'd be doing you justice, or I don't think I'd be giving you a comprehensive answer on which exercise to do if I have no knowledge of those contributing factors as well. But in saying that, though, what I do know, what I would recommend is that with any exercise program, there should be an element of some strength, some aerobic, some balance, and mobility work in it. Of course, if it's suitable for you. And once again, it'll depend on your exercise levels or your main goals as well. So an exercise for you might not be applicable for someone else, but that doesn't mean that what's applicable for one person doesn't mean necessarily that it completely rules it out for you as well. Looking at the table here, we can appreciate from this table that someone's aerobic exercise might be different to someone else's, and that's okay, because the main thing that I guess I was trying to get across is that we are targeting the exercise category, so the aerobic, for example. So yeah, let's just stick with the aerobic. So aerobic exercise is a staple in any program, and it can be applied in many ways. So we can see here that for client A, aerobic exercise might mean shadow boxing, because either he or she prefers that, they enjoy that, or it might be because of their mobility and lower limb strength, mean walking for a long duration is not feasible, or it's not the most appropriate option. But that also doesn't mean that aerobic exercise is then ruled out. It just simply means that client A has acknowledged this and modified exercises that work for them and really played to their strengths. So, just looking at these exercises, client A seems to be having more chair-based exercises. Client C maybe has exercises that require more mobility. And then client B is somewhere in the middle of client A and C. So I guess the main thing I want you guys to get away from this table is that although someone's aerobic, strength and so on exercises are different, the categories are still being ticked off and achieved in many different ways. So just to break things up a bit, I've added three slides of just some staple exercises that may or may not be applicable to you. But let's just start off with some TheraBand exercises. So I find that if people ask that if they have a TheraBand, the general response is that they do have one, but they just don't know how to use the TheraBand to its full potential. And it's a very, very effective and easy piece of equipment that can be utilized to really up your exercise routine. So here are just some basic upper and lower body strengthening exercises that can be done with a TheraBand. So we've got things like a chest press, which is the top left, bicep curls, which is the top middle, knee extensions, which is the bottom left, and so on. And so as I mentioned before, the TheraBand just offers some extra resistance to a particular exercise, but it doesn't mean the exercise can only be done with a TheraBand. So, for example, the knee extensions can be performed without the TheraBand as well. And so, just in case if you're wondering where I can purchase one of these TheraBands, I know your stores like your Big W's, your Kmart's, your Rebels, they stock all this sort of equipment as well. So, if that's something that you think would be of interest and of benefit to you, then yeah, I think that those places, those sorts of stores would be a good starting point. So same idea here, just some staple body weight exercises that can be done when equipment might be a limiting factor, such as exercising at home. So we've got things like a war chest press, the top left, which is a great upper body movement. We've got sit to stands, a great lower body movement as well. But also, I think it's important that we make use of the things that you have at your disposal at home. So things such as a stair or a step. Other things such as a water bottle for some bicep curls or some arm exercises, or it might be even putting on a backpack and adding in books or just adding in anything that adds weight to the bag when you're doing your sit-to stands, if you're finding the sit-to stands to be really easy for you. So I think the main thing is just to get creative about things and just you know, have fun with it, but more importantly, just stay active and keep moving and stay on the move while enjoying it at the same time. So once again, just some basic balance exercises here as well. So by reducing the base of support and having the feet together, we're challenging our balance. And so, we can make this more challenging by having head turns, which in the middle picture we can see. But also another really important thing to note and for me to mention is the safety as well. So, just make sure if you are doing any balance exercises that you're doing so in a safe environment as well. So I guess just to summarize what we talked about so far in terms of exercise, let's look towards staying active on most days with at least two to three exercise sessions per week, consisting of some aerobic, balance, strength, and mobility exercises. Because, as this quote really puts really well and really summarizes the why. The single thing that comes close to a magic bullet in terms of its strong and universal benefits is exercise. So I think that's a really powerful statement. I think that puts the cherry on top on the why of exercise as well. So we've discussed the benefits of exercise and what we should be doing to get active. But as I mentioned before, it's also important we touch on the barriers to exercise as well. So when we're talking barriers to exercise, it may involve obstacles that we all face, such as motivation, accountability, or that added support. But also there may be more specific barriers for someone living with MS as well, such as heat sensitivity, fatigue, or mobility as well. So what I want to do is spend the next few slides just discussing the barriers, but also sharing some food for thought on maybe some potential strategies that you may be able to implement to overcome, or maybe at least minimize the barriers that apply to you. Especially with the warmer climate soon approaching, with summer soon approaching, I think heat sensitivity is a common barrier that a majority of people with MS would face. And so not only with exercise is heat sensitivity can be an issue, but in carrying out everyday tasks, it can be quite hindering as well. So before we discuss some common strategies that we can implement to mitigate heat sensitivity as well, I think it's important we first talk about what heat sensitivity is and also why it occurs. Because I think if we're able to answer or understand that, then we're able to then understand ways or come up with ways together on how you can reduce or mitigate heat sensitivity for you. So I'm sure you may know someone who experiences heat sensitivity, or you may even be someone who experiences heat sensitivity as well. So people with MS often experience a reaction to heat, which in turn may cause a temporary worsening of your symptoms. Now, I want to really emphasize on the word temporary because it does not make your MS worse. It doesn't cause an exacerbation or lead to any permanent damage as well. Instead, these temporary worsening of some of your MS symptoms will pass once your body starts to cool down as well. So that's why having some of those strategies in place from the get-go will really help in the long run in mitigating or reducing that heat sensitivity from really taking off. So we know that in MS, the transmission of messages from the brain and spinal cord to the rest of the body is interrupted or slowed down. And so that's illustrated in the picture here, where as a result of MS, the protective myelin sheath is damaged, which is not good because the function of that myelin sheath is to rapidly and efficiently transmit signals between the brain and the rest of the body. So then what that means then is that if this protective myelin sheath is damaged, it causes an interruption of the speed of messaging, the efficiency of the messaging. And so this problem, this the speed of the messaging is worsened with heat sensitivity. So getting hot or that increase in body temperature slows down the messages traveling along our nerves, which have already been impacted by MS itself. So it just compounds. So heat sensitivity just compounds to the problem that's already there with MS. So in saying that though, the good news is that there are various cooling strategies that can be implemented and that can be quite effective as well. So here are just a list of different strategies that can be effective in minimizing heat sensitivity, but also in regards to exercise as well. It can be easily implemented. So maybe a few things to consider if you haven't already are things such as, doing your exercise in the morning where, you may feel more fresh, but also, the climate that in the morning is, relatively cooler compared to if you were going to exercise in the middle of the day or the early afternoon as well. Other things such as the clothing that you're wearing. So making sure you're wearing loose, breathable clothing or just clothing that you'd be comfortable exercising in as well. So another thing is just ensuring your environment is cool. So that's things such as ensuring you use shade if you're not indoors, cooling devices such as a fan on standby or mist sprays, but also just simply staying hydrated as well, frequently with some icy cold water as well. But as well as that, just make sure that you pace yourself, take frequent rest breaks when exercising, but also consider changing things up a bit. And instead of doing maybe some aerobic exercises on the arm, if you have on an arm crank, if you're at your gym or on an exercise bike, and you might choose to instead do some strengthening exercises on that warm day, as generally speaking, the strengthening exercise will have a reduced impact on heat development when compared to some more strenuous aerobic exercises. So although heat sensitivity is a very real and common barrier to exercise, consider what you can do to maintain a cool environment and lessen the impact of heat sensitivity. And so also just what I mean by types of meals, what I mean by that is, on a really warm day, you might want to have you might be less inclined to have a really hot meal like some soup or a tea or a coffee, and instead maybe something that doesn't really generate that heat as well. So just simple things like that that when combined can make a real impact as well. So I also wanted to discuss fatigue, which is another very extremely common symptom of MS. So, before going through some of the strategies when dealing with fatigue, let's just firstly discuss what and why MS fatigue occurs. So almost everyone with MS will experience fatigue, and it's one of those invisible symptoms, but one that is perhaps one of the most disabling to people, as it completely disrupts the flow of a person's typical day. And so MS fatigue is very different to ordinary fatigue. And the best way I like to describe it is that is through an analogy. So just imagine, you have a phone, and so when that phone is low in battery, you leave it on charge for 2 to 3 hours or whatever time it may be, okay? And then you come back to your phone and it's fully charged, it's on 100%. Now, with MS, this isn't the case. And so when you put that same phone on charge and you leave it on charge for a few hours, it doesn't necessarily mean that after those few hours that the phone's going to be fully charged, okay? That battery might still be low. And so that's what differentiates MS fatigue from just your ordinary fatigue as well. And so that's why rest may not always lead to an improvement of fatigue, but instead there are various other strategies to consider, which we'll discuss in the next slide. And it's one of the main reasons why rest might actually be counterintuitive, and why exercise and staying active can actually be quite beneficial, and has been shown to be beneficial in managing MS fatigue as well. But before we move on in regards to some of the strategies, let's first discuss what causes fatigue in MS. So it can be a result of the MS itself, which is described as primary fatigue, or it may be a result of other factors such as depression, walking patterns, spasticity, which all require more energy expenditure. And so as it requires more energy expenditure, that leads to more fatigue as well. So that describes secondary fatigue. But let's touch more so on why primary fatigue may occur. And so primary fatigue, it's said to be as a result of the interruption of nerve messages, which cause a detour of messages, which in turn, once again, require more energy expenditure. So instead of going straight from point A to point B, as a result of primary fatigue in MS, we need to go through a maze now to reach that point B. So once again, just so it's maybe easier to understand, and just so I make a bit more sense, it's similar to taking a detour on a road. Because that road is closed, you have to go all the way around, or you have to make a lot of turns through streets and whatnot. And what all that does is that it requires more distance to be covered, and therefore more fuel to be used, okay? And so the same concept applies to primary fatigue as well. So as mentioned, rest may not always be the best option, or may not solve the issue as well. But instead, two key factors to consider are, number one, maximizing the energy in the tank, in your energy tank, and then number two, using that energy in the tank efficiently, okay? And not just splurging all your energy early in the morning, okay? It's all about being efficient with what you have. So it's all about budgeting. So as you can see, some things to consider in maximizing that energy is your sleep, having a look at your sleep, your mood, and maintaining regular exercise as well. And then by maximizing our energy through all these factors, what that then allows us to do is to store that energy and use it in an efficient way by planning ahead, prioritizing tasks, and pacing yourself as well. So for example, you may choose to go to the shops early in the morning, as you know, you'll find a lot of parking close by, but also at the shops, if you're doing your grocery shopping, planning ahead would be good. And a way that would help is that instead of going up and down every aisle, you know exactly what you need to get, where you need to get it from, and so in doing so, you're using less energy to carry out your grocery shopping. So just very simple ways that you can save your energy expenditure and then use it for more important tasks later in the day, such as exercise. When it comes to exercise, a few things to consider: maybe taking frequent rest breaks, alternating muscle groups, so doing a leg exercise followed by an upper body exercise and so on. But as well as that, you may need to fine-tune the exercise volume. So for example, if you're just starting out, let's not go from 0 to 100, but instead it might be best to start with some gentle, low intensity exercise and then build up from there. So once again, although fatigue is a prominent issue in MS, there are strategies you may find beneficial to minimize the barrier of fatigue in MS. So once again, I think it's important to note that what one person does may not be as effective for another. And that's okay, because the main thing we want to achieve is to do what is best for your personal situation, taking into account your goals and main concerns. So just because you're not able to do a certain exercise doesn't mean that you can't achieve aerobic exercise, for example. It just means you need to work to your strengths and do what is possible for you. So I won't go over this too much, but basically when it comes to motivation, there's always that desire from within to do a certain deed. And that's what we call intrinsic motivation. And so extrinsic motivation is the opposite to intrinsic motivation. So do I think one is better than the other? No, I don't, but I think it's fine to have a mix of both. So for example, you like to exercise because it makes you feel good, but also because you get to socialize with your friends. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what I would say is that, you know, sometimes when that extrinsic motivation is taken away, finding that drive within becomes especially important. So for me, it's because I genuinely enjoy exercise. I can shut off all my troubles. I feel better after. But as well as that, I know that it's good for my health. And so for me, exercise really is the number one investment that you can make. And so that's what really motivates me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, to exercise. So one very easy and effective way to overcome those barriers to exercise, such as that lack of motivation or accountability, is to also set a goal. But we want to be setting a SMART goal as well. So to put a SMART goal into action, an example would be Mary here, she wants to get fit, okay, which is great, but we've got to ask how we're going to achieve that. So to turn this into a SMART goal, it would look something like: Mary will ride an exercise bike at home for 20 minutes in the morning, 4 times a week for the next 2 months, in order to improve her fitness levels. So just by looking at both examples, the Mary wants to get fit, or that the SMART goal below it, just by reading it, hopefully we're able to agree that by having a SMART goal in place, we're more likely to follow through that goal, stay more motivated and accountable, and as a result, stay active. So maybe setting a SMART goal on the number of days you will exercise might be just what you need in order to get active and motivate yourself to exercise. So we talked about how much exercise, what sort of exercise, and why that exercise is important. We also have to acknowledge that there are barriers to exercise, which we discussed as well previously. But what I want to do now is discuss some other barriers we all face, and one that I found quite common with clients, as mentioned before, is that motivation and that accountability. So what I'm a big believer in is that when dealing with a neuro condition like MS, having a team approach to it, is always best practice. So having your OT, your EP, your neurologist, your doctor, and so on is key to managing one's condition effectively. But within this team, and the same goes for any other team, there should always be a team captain. And in this case, that team captain should really be you, yourself, the client. You're in charge, you steer the ship and you pick the team as well. And I really do believe that if you have this mindset, and then if you have this way of thinking, you're more inclined to take on that responsibility and act in a way that suits the agenda that the team has, which is to improve your health, well-being, and quality of life of you, yourself, the team captain. And so by having this mindset, or having this team captain approach, we're effectively being more accountable, but also staying motivated to do better. Now, obviously, this is easier said than done. It's not something that you can just switch on. But hopefully, talking about the barriers and some of the strategies in place, hopefully that plants a few seeds, so that over time, it will lead you to make better health and well-being choices as well. So I guess to summarize this section, try to take on that team captain role. Use the team members around you to empower you to be confident in what you're doing, but also confident in the fact that you're the leader of your own health. But also in saying that, don't forget that you do have those other team members around you as well, who are there to support you, advise you, and help set up that game plan, so to say. And so Andrea already mentioned that she'll be sending a link, but here's a link. If I'm not sure if you're able to click on it or not, but I'd really recommend people download the MS Lifestyle Guide from the MS Research Australia website, or by following the link if we're able to do so. And just a really great read and very informative in providing evidence-based guidelines relating to modifiable lifestyle choices such as exercise. So just on the home stretch now, just another, just something to, I guess, note down, and it might be of interest to you, is that, if you're looking to add in a few extra exercises into your exercise library, then check this out. It will just provide you with some further inspiration. But I mean, just remember, the main thing is that you're able to add in some aerobic, strength, balance, mobility, and other exercises into your program as well. And so Andrea did mention that she'll send you the info sheet on the telehealth and how to reach out as well. But just if you're looking for further guidance or some more individualized support, there are plenty of services out there that are able to assist. So I find that the Find an Exercise Physiologist page is a good starting point, but also MS Connect would be a really great starting point as well, just to seek further information and to help you, and to link you to the services or support that you're after as well. And so I'll have the MS Connect number towards the end of the slides as well. So I mean, just to summarize what we discussed, we talked about the benefits of exercise, which we should aim to do on a consistent basis, two times a week, 2 to 3 times a week, but also staying physically active on most days. We also touched on the main components of an exercise program, and because everyone's goals, concerns, and presentation are different, it's not so much about what exercise that you do, but it's instead about ticking off that exercise category. In saying that though, we also did acknowledge that there are barriers to exercising with MS, but we did discuss some strategies that you might be able to perhaps implement to overcome or at least minimize the barriers as well. And so just to finish off, I guess the take-home message is simple. Exercise really is a non-negotiable, and it's really important that we stay active, stay connected, stay in touch, and more importantly, stay healthy, especially during what has been a very challenging and difficult year for, I'm sure, everyone. So that wraps it up from my end. I'll be happy to take some questions, or or as well as that, feel free to get in contact as well if that's more appropriate to do so. But thank you for everyone for tuning in, listening, and giving me the opportunity to share some knowledge with you guys, and hopefully everyone really took something out of it, at least one thing, I hope. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Thanks, Andrea.
That's fabulous, Eric. Thank you so much. If you leave it on that slide, that would be great. There's
sure
been some great comments coming through, and some good tips as well. Ben's reminding us that there are some good webinars on YouTube that are a source for different exercises and stretching videos. The reminder about the cooling vests and cooling neckties to help overcome heat intolerance. Thanks for that one, Yana. There's a comment about exercising in water from Gillian. She's found that's the answer for her in regard to not overheating. And I added the comment, so long as it's not a hydro pool, because some people find a hydrotherapy pool far too hot, but water can be great. And then, Eric, a question about, are there any specific exercises for reducing spasticity?
So, I mean, I guess it depends where that spasticity is occurring. But what I'd recommend is doing, number one, some stretching to that area that has that spasticity. But then number two is strengthening the opposing muscle group. So, for example, if we let's just say that spasticity is occurring in the bicep, which is the arm muscle which we use to flex our arm. Okay. So number one, what we do is stretch out that bicep muscle. So the way I stretch out that muscle is we extend that arm or the elbow. Okay. And then number two, some strengthening exercises that we can do. In this case of spasticity in the biceps would be some strengthening exercise of the opposing muscle groups, which is the triceps, which is the arms that extend that elbow. So I guess to answer the question, strengthening exercises and also stretching as well. The affected area would be the best way forward in terms of what exercise can do. But as well as that, there are also other things to consider, such as medication as well. So hopefully that answers the question.
That's great. And yes, I guess we take your point that it's very hard to give specific advice without knowing the full story, but that's great. Thank you. Eric, there's incidental exercise that we do just because we're moving around the house and maybe doing housework. How does that differ from more formal exercise? And within any of that, I guess we need to also build in rest breaks.
Of course, yeah. And incidental exercise, whether it be your chores that you do at home, gardening or whatnot, perfect, excellent, I love that. Where it differs from exercise specifically is that, as I mentioned before, exercise is more purposeful and it works towards a specific goal. For example, balance, and what I mentioned before, balance. Let's say balance is a goal. Is staying active and doing your house chores and everything isn't necessarily going to improve or work on your balance. It doesn't mean that staying active and doing all those incidental exercises isn't good, but it's not necessarily going to work on your balance. And that's where exercise comes into play, where exercise is more structured and it works towards a specific goal, or it's more purposeful in what you want to achieve. And so through some balance exercise, some strengthening exercises, we're then able to improve on that goal of balance. So that's where incidental exercise and structured exercise is different. Not to say that, not to take anything away from incidental exercise, but when you want to work towards a specific goal or a specific fitness goal, exercise is more purposeful and it helps you achieve that goal in a more effective manner. So I hope that answers the question.
That's great. Yes, thanks, Eric. A question about foot drop, knee buckling and foot drop during an exercise program. Is that a symptom of maybe fatigue from over exercising?
No, it can be. These symptoms can be worsened with fatigue. So, for example, what you may notice is that, you know, if you're doing, let's just say, 10 minutes of walking, the first minute you might be walking with good walking pattern, you might be walking well, but then towards maybe the 7th, 8th minute, you start to see that it's really becoming a lot more difficult to lift that foot up or to lift that ankle up and clear the floor. So it can be related to muscle fatigue. In saying that, though, it is also a separate symptom as well of MS, and so that knee buckling, so that knee hyperextension, as well as that foot drop, can be, I guess, influenced by fatigue, but at the same time, it is also influenced by other factors as well. So not specifically linked to fatigue, but can be influenced by fatigue.
Thank you. I think it reinforces the need to get some specific advice on some things. And probably I'd also say that there's never anything too small to ask about. So
Yep.
it's always worth asking the question. Thank you, Eric, for your time today, and thank you for your preparation of this presentation. It's great to hear the information, but it's also great to get the encouragement and the support. And a few people have been commenting on that to me in the questions and comments area, that it's great to be reminded and to be encouraged. So thank you so much. If we don't get to your questions now and you feel that your question hasn't been answered or something occurs to you later, please reach out, email or call MS Connect, and they will be able to connect you. They might be able to answer your question directly, or they will move you on if they need to pass you on to someone else to answer your question. But as I say, thanks so much for everyone being online. Thanks for all your contributions and your tips and tricks. And thank you, Eric, for your time today. Thanks, everyone. We'll look forward to seeing you at another webinar down the track.